Hello. Hey, welcome back, Kat.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see you again,
Mhm.
Sammy.
Yeah.
This time not in the parking
Yeah, and there's no major snowstorm too, right? I hope,
lot.
right?
The last time I talked to Sammy, I was like, I'm stuck in a parking lot and there's a snowstorm. Is it okay if I take the Zoom like in my car? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no.
All right. There we go. Yo, welcome to My Summer Lair. I'm your host, Sammy. The NHL has a team called the Canadians and another team called the Canucks. But isn't that all the same thing? Younan. History lesson, kids. On the evening of June 15, 2011, Vancouver erupted in fire. It all started on June 1st, 2011, with Game 1 of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. I know I'm a basketball guy, but stay with me. There's going to be a bunch of hockey, but it's not that painful. The Vancouver Canucks had home ice advantage in the finals. They were rewarded as the team that finished with the best regular season record. They were facing the Boston Bruins, who went into the finals with a 39-year Stanley Cup drought. Quickly, the Canucks won the first two games to go up 2-0 on the Bruins. Things are looking good. Then the series shifted to Boston at the TD Garden, the same arena where the Celtics play. See? Basketball guy. Once again, the home team triumphed in games 3 and 4. Boston defeated Vancouver, including a shutout in game 4. Now the series is tied at 2. The remaining 3 games will be played in Vancouver, Boston if need be, then the dreaded Game 7 in Vancouver. It needed to be. Once again, the Canucks won at home, and so did the Bruins, which triggered at Game 7. Game 7 is one of the most thrilling phrases in all of sports, as thrilling as all-day breakfast, yet as anxiety-producing as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Yes, the Canucks had home ice, but history was not on their side. The Canucks joined the Hockey League in 1970 as an expansion team along with the Buffalo Sabres. In its NHL history, the team has advanced to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 times, losing to the New York Islanders in 1982, the New York Rangers in 1994, and yet here in 2011, they were a Game 7 away from defeating the Boston Bruins. History triumphed when the Vancouver Canucks not only lost Game 7, but were shut out. They didn't even score a goal in the decisive, all-on-the-line Game 7 NHL Stanley Cup final game. More history happened, like in 1994 when they lost that NHL Finals to the Rangers. The city erupted in a riot. 2011 was no different. Another bitter finals loss prompted an angry outpouring of dark energy. The stark difference between 1994 and 2011 was a smartphone riot. Many participants in the riot stood and posed for photographs, with some even posting the photos on their own social media accounts. Hashtag look at me, I'm rioting. Photos and videos were also taken by onlookers intent on documenting the riot. The police were overwhelmed. The riot itself was just under 5 hours. That was quelled quickly enough. But now to sift through all the photos and videos to tag and identify the looters and the rioters was arduous work, yet so fruitful. Over 300 people were successfully identified and charged from the social media bounty. This is the basic backdrop of the 30 for 30 documentary I'm Just Here for the Riot, directed by Youngman and Kathleen Jayme. This ESPN documentary chronicles the aftermath of the physical riot in Vancouver streets, where now the mob mentality has cruelly shifted to an online presence. Despicable online hunting meant the rioters were outed, doxxed, shamed, and some had their lives altered forever. Some even received death threats. Like, yo, why? How are death threats or posting somebody's home address justice? That's not how justice works. This stuff bugs me. It is one of the cruelest things we do is dehumanization. It's us versus them, which I guess in a way is what all sports is, us versus them, right? Here now to better unpack the themes of this 30 for 30 are the directors Youngman and Kathleen Jayme.
Sound, The Final Frontier. My Summer Lair is an enterprise, a pop culture voyage with a continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new creators and celebrate established producers, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now here is your host Sammy Younan.
Since there are two of you, I'm going to have you introduce yourselves just so audiences can hear your voice. But tell me, from your perspective, what makes a perfect day in Vancouver? Is there a place that you like to go? Is there something like type of food you like to eat? Like, what makes a perfect day for you in Vancouver? So introduce your name and your perfect Vancouver day.
My name is AJ Youngman. I am the co-director of I'm Just Here for the Riot. My perfect day in Vancouver would definitely be sunshine, which we don't get a lot of. But, when we do, I love to go for walks on the seawall, just have a coffee in hand, definitely get some sushi. We have great sushi here in Vancouver. Friends, and yeah, just get outside.
Nice. That's a good day.
And I'm Kat Jayme, also one of the co-directors of I'm Just Here for the Riot. And yeah, Asia, that's pretty much my perfect day. It's a summer day in Vancouver when the sun is out, hanging out with friends by the beach, and then going to get some ramen because I still love ramen even in the summer.
Okay. All right. There you go. I like how both of it has a little bit of nature and a little bit of food.
Yeah,
the essentials.
Yeah, basically, yeah. For your documentary, so this is a 30 for 30, and generally a lot of 30 for 30s focus on the athletes that we kind of champion, Bo Jackson, Reggie Miller, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky. This one focuses more on hockey fans, and that's a notable shift. I'm curious what your pitch was like to ESPN.
Well, I think what I love about ESPN is that, ESPN 30 for 30s in particular, is that, it's a sports, it's a topic that is told from, and the way into that topic is from like a sports story. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why when Asia and I were talking about this film, and we were like, I feel like the best place for this kind of story would be a 30 for 30, because it's not about hockey, right? Like it's about the riot and what happened on social media. So like sports is the entry point, but there's so much more that we want to talk about and discuss. And so, yeah, I think that's why the dream was always a 30 for 30. And we're really lucky and grateful that that's where, the film ended up landing.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add to that too, I think when in the very early conversations with the former director of development, Adam Newhouse, he was so excited about a film about social media. They had been looking to do a 30 for 30 that really explored that subject matter. And so I think it was, a mixture of the right timing just for both what they were looking for and kind of what Kat and I were bringing forward in terms of a project. And so I think too, just because of the amount of time that had passed with the 2011 Stanley Cup Hockey Riot, sort of just what was happening in the world. I think everything kind of just aligned perfectly with timing.
Yeah, it's about time, as you said, for a sports documentary to kind of start exploring some of the social media aspects, right? I know NBA players will sometimes look at their Twitter feeds during halftime and see how they're doing and if people like what they're doing, that kind of thing. And then we also get all these stories now of when somebody's a free agent, they unfollow the team on Instagram or on Twitter, and it's oh no, they're gonna leave, right? So it's starting to have a lot more traction, I guess, right? In terms of how we view sports through a social media lens.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think social media, especially, nowadays with what cancel culture has become, in 2011, what's interesting in 2011 was that social media was just brand new. Mm-hmm. And that's why people weren't putting two and two together that, hey, I'm taking photos of myself riding, of my friends riding. I'm writing, I'm updating my Facebook status, and I'm sharing with everyone what I'm doing. They didn't understand at that time what they were doing, and what they were doing was actually incriminating themselves. And so that disconnect, obviously now looking back, it's so easy for us to say, well, that's so what were they thinking? I'm actually, now I'm just kind of spitting lines from, I've watched the film so many times right now, but no. And so that's why I think now, as Asia said, it was kind of the perfect time to tell this story, to actually discuss all these things that are happening in social media and how cancel culture has evolved since 2011 into the kind of what it is now that we see pretty much happening every day.
Yeah, to give it some context of what you're talking about, this riot was 2011, but Instagram only came out in 2010. So this is like barely a year old, right? And like the iPhone came out in 2007. So these are a few years just after all these kind of major shifts have happened. But as you said, Kat, like we haven't really processed what these shifts are. And so when people are writing, they're just taking photos and videos of themselves. So how did you guys decide like what to show in terms of the riot itself? Because there was like thousands of hours of video and all kinds of photos, news footage as well. So what was your North Star? Was there something that you really want to show, or was there something that you didn't really want to show?
It was certainly hard to shift through all the footage. Like we had, probably just hours and hours of different footage. Like we were very fortunate to have some people come forward and say, I was filming downtown. I have this footage. No one's ever seen it. It's just been sitting on a hard drive for like 10 years. And they're going to share with us. So we were really lucky just to get some incredible, never before seen footage. But I think for us, really, we wanted to immerse people in that night. And that's kind of how we start the film, right? We want people to feel sort of what was felt for people that were downtown, and just the chaos and the sounds and just like the energy that was in the air. So I think we just wanted to show how extreme it was, especially for people who maybe don't know too much about Vancouver, who don't know too much about Canada. I think it might be for some people, outside of Canada, to see like this is how we have behaved and how we can behave if we lose a hockey game.
Yeah. For the second time as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was a 94 riot, I guess. Like I didn't know about the 94 riot. I was around, but I just don't remember ever hearing about it or seeing about it. But I remember this like 2011 riot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh no, I know. I think you hit it. Like we wanted the riot. We wanted when audiences watch the riot to feel like they were there that night. And I've seen the film so many times, obviously, through the editing process, and I will still get notifications. Like my iWatch will like go off to be like after the riot sequence. It'll be like your heart rate jumped, like like it jumped during this, like while you were sitting down or whatever. So I've seen it so many times, and the footage and the way that our editor Greg Ng has put it together just really like makes you feel like that you're right there. And that was sort of always the goal with the film, and especially when we talk about the riot, was like we want audiences, especially those, like Asia said, especially those who weren't there that night, because I feel like you really, and in order to understand like the gravity of the riots, and why everyone was so mad, you have to understand what it was like to actually see everything and all the disturbing and wild things that happened, over the course of I think it was like 3 hours the riot lasted or something like that. So yeah, it was our goal to make it as much of a visceral experience as possible.
Part of that visceral experience though was, and I this was also kind of interesting too to see it, was you kind of dismissed the idea of a mob mentality, because you have a bunch of footage of people like standing up for Vancouver basically, and like don't destroy this building, don't destroy this car, and they were trying to like calm rioters down. Of course it was a mostly losing cause, because everyone was like at that point full on like rioting and like either drunk or high or whatever it was. But that idea too was that encouraging for you as people who live in Vancouver to see also that good side? Because this was a really kind of dark chapter for Vancouver.
Yeah, I think it was really important for Kat and I just to show a multitude of perspectives, because we never wanted to finger point or blame anyone for why this happened, but just kind of gain an understanding by seeing, perspectives from everyone. So I think for us, like we wanted to show that it wasn't all bad. Like there were people standing up. And I think the interesting thing about challenging mob mentality is that I think it's so easy to kind of blame, an idea for someone's behavior. But then, of course, there's people who counter that and they're saying, well, I was downtown and I was doing this and that and I didn't riot. So I think it's important to see both sides of things. We don't want to, give a free pass to anyone who actually, did riot, but we also just wanted to understand that, a lot of these were young people. They were caught up in the moment. They were excited. They made a very bad decision that affected their life. And I think that's a big theme for us, is just kind of understanding the mistakes that make us human, and just understanding kind of what has happened in history so that it hopefully doesn't happen again. Because of course, like you mentioned, Sammy, it's happened twice in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So we don't want a third.
Yeah, it's a weird BC tradition, I guess, right? Like you don't want that as a tradition.
No, we're not proud of it.
No. And then this idea of what you're saying, Asia, of like making mistakes and learning from it. How did you approach the people that are in the documentary that are like, that rioted, obviously, and now are still dealing with the consequences of their actions? Did people want to tell their story, or were they like reluctant? Did you get a lot of no's because of the shame involved, or how was that approach like?
It was kind of all of the above, Sammy. There was, a lot of people that Asia and I tried to get, but a lot of people declined. A lot of people just never responded. But we still were able to we managed to get a handful of people who were involved in the riots say yes and trust us, and that took a lot of work, a lot of relationship building, a lot of trust building, which of course is what a job of every documentary filmmaker is. Yeah, no, it was I feel like all the writers who were involved in the film, I have to commend them, and as for them being just really brave for all after all these years coming forward and sharing their stories, and just sharing their perspective and what actually happened. And that was kind of what Age and I kind of pitched to them when we first made contact, and we said, we don't want to point fingers or point blame at anyone. That's not the intention of this film. The intention of this film is we just really want to try to understand what happened, and hopefully make audiences understand what was going through your mind that night and the days after. And that's kind of, I think, why so many people said yes to us, is because they, first of all, obviously they trusted Asia and I, but they felt like this was, we wanted to make sure that it was a safe space for them to share their story. And it was definitely like an open conversation throughout, even after the interviews. Like Asia and I would check in on with our subjects who were part of the riot, and we'd have discussions with them about, okay, what are you comfortable with? Let us know if there's anything that, are you having second thoughts about this, or like, hey, like we are including this, are you okay with it? So we wanted to make sure that it was an open conversation and that they felt okay with kind of the topics that we would be discussing. I'll throw it to you, Asia.
Just to add to that, I think the fear with some of the folks that we interviewed was that they didn't want to relive this again. They've moved on since, they put this behind them. They learned a lot from what they did, but they don't want to have to go through that again. So we really just worked with them. For some of their interviews, we agreed to use a different name. We agreed to hide their identities. We showed them the frame before we even started shooting. Like Kat said, we reached out and said, hey, like, are you okay if we do this? And this is what's included in the film, and those sorts of things. So we just really wanted to be transparent with people, because, of course, for Kat and I, like a huge fear for us is that we would never want someone else in the film to kind of go through that again and have it have a huge effect on their life like it did. So we're really conscious of that. But on the opposite side is that some people just came forward and they just felt like, I have this story, I'm ready to share it. And we were just so lucky that people trusted us to tell their story. So it was a bit of a mixture, with Kat and I doing a lot of convincing, doing a lot of research, and then also just having some people who wanted to come forward and share.
Yeah, and part of the consequences that you guys are talking about, it's not just like you rioted or you broke some windows in downtown Vancouver, and then obviously you got arrested or paid a fine or whatever it was. There was also then like the response of the online mob as well. So it was almost like two different mobs in a sense, which is what the documentary is showing. The first mob is obviously the one that rioted downtown Vancouver. And then the second one is this kind of like toxic mob where people were exposing like their home address or calling them directly, find out their phone number, and then calling them and harassing them. Like, how was, like, I guess what I'm asking is, like, in terms of showing that, how would you describe like the experience? Like, because it feels like an unrelenting mob, right? Like you said, Kat, the Vancouver mob was only 3 hours, and that was like a beginning, middle, and end. This online mob continued for like months and sometimes even years after. It's still on Google searches. What is it like to live with that kind of tension and trauma, I guess?
Sorry.
We're always looking at each other to say who's gonna go.
Okay,
I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very early on when Kat and I were pitching the film, we always saw the online mob as its own kind of riot in a sense. It's almost like we're looking at the physical riot that happened on the streets, but then we're also looking at the online riot that happened through social media. So we really wanted to kind of show both sides, but I think, what people talk about in the film is that the online riot was so much worse kind of than the repercussions of what they did in the physical riot. I think you see other perspectives too, where people maybe, well, it's just words, it's just social media, blah, blah, blah. But like, no, I think, those words really can have a huge detrimental effect on a person. And I think especially nowadays, right, where we really just kind of use social media in all aspects of our lives. I think it's important to show that, you can look at a physical riot and the people who became involved and the people who were documenting and staying and watching and cheering people on. But then you can also look at what's happening online. And because everyone's sort of hidden by a computer, I think they feel like they can just really kind of come out and take down a person without really understanding the full story of what happened, maybe understanding what's going on in that person's lives or their history and how their past experiences have maybe affected some of their choices in their life. So I think for us, we really just wanted to hopefully give audiences both sides of it, and hopefully audience will take away sort of and reflect on what they would do in a situation like that.
One of the people that's a surprise in the documentary is John Ronson. He's super British. He's a really cool writer.
Yeah.
What was the decision to approach him? And then and just for people who don't know who he is, can you just kind of give a snapshot of who he is and what he contributed to the doc?
So the idea to interview John Ronson came from one of our subjects so John Ronson is a writer and a director who has made, some amazing films. And he's also a podcaster, right? Asia, is that? Yeah.
He's not a director. He's a screenwriter though.
Okay. Screenwriter. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. And he wrote a book called "So You've Been Publicly Shamed." And one of our subjects, when we were doing our initial sort of research call, had said, I read this book that really helped me in, during the aftermath of being social media shamed online. And so Asia and I read the book, and we were like, it would be so great to have John's perspective, because he's obviously someone who has researched this topic in depth. And there's so many great theories that he talks about in his book that I feel like Asia and I used in our research and used to craft the questions that we had when we were interviewing our subjects. And so ESPN helped us get connected with him, and Asia and I wrote him like an email that kind of pitched to him why we thought his voice would be integral to the story. And thankfully John said yes. We, like, Asia was able to, we both went to New York, and Asia was able to interview him. And he was great. Asia, do you want to add anything about our awesome friend, John?
I think that covered most of it. I mean, I wish we could have included more of his perspective in the film, because he's so many interesting things to say. He's also just so funny. Like, even the tidbits that you see of him in the film, like, he always makes me smile. Like, I love his demeanor.
Very dry British wit.
Yes. Yeah. He's just a wonderful person. We're very lucky to get him on board. I think initially he had some hesitations because he wasn't that familiar with what happened. And I think he felt like he wasn't sure that his perspective would kind of align with what we were focusing on. But I think, we got on a phone call with him and explained sort of the story and how some of the things that he discussed in his book really kind of were parallel with some of the rioters' stories of how they were kind of shamed online. So I think, he kind of was willing to chat with us. So we were very fortunate to get him on board.
Asia, I want to ask you a specific question. I hope it's not too difficult, because you've in the past talked in other interviews about being bullied when you were growing up. And is the way that the rioters were shamed online, is that kind of similar to the way that you were bullied growing up? Or is there has it kind of evolved now and it's a little bit more insidious, right? Where people are trying to put somebody's home address online and those kind of things. There's a little bit more evil, I guess. Has bullying evolved, I guess, is what I'm asking in a weird way.
That's a really interesting question, Sammy. I never really thought of that when I kind of was thinking about this film, like I think for me, like I studied psychology and sociology in my undergrad at university, and I think I was always just a little bit curious about people and society and why we do the things we do. But I guess, yeah, thinking about kind of my own childhood, like certainly social media was very different when I was growing up. Like we had like MSN and those types of things, next MySpace, whatever was around. Of course, yeah, you kind of deal with certain things that people say and in all forms of social media. I think for myself, it was more kind of like directly, like when I was in high school, like I'm Indigenous, I was the only Indigenous kid at my school. And kids can be pretty mean. And I think because I didn't really have anyone who looked like me growing up, it was really hard for me just to kind of be in that environment and really just gain an understanding of my own identity as an Indigenous person, and my connection to my culture. So I did struggle with that a lot growing up. Kids are racist, kids are mean. So I guess maybe in some aspects, like thinking about the stories of these people who experienced this form of bullying online, I think for me it kind of struck a chord because I did experience that in a different way, of course, and but it still is bullying, and so I think that maybe has given me a little bit more of like an empathetic lens with this type of story, and just kind of giving people a little bit of not a pass, but just understanding people, and we all make mistakes, and we all hopefully learn from those mistakes, and I think that's the most important thing.
You're talking about grace.
Sorry?
You're talking about
Yeah.
grace, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like recognize that somebody's not perfect and they're going to slip up. And I think that was kind of one of the themes that run through some of the writers' interviews that you guys did, where like they're ashamed of their actions, but at the same time, they were like, look, I screwed up. Like, I shouldn't have to continually face consequences for like one stupid mistake, right? Like, there should be a limit where like, just because you're guilty for this one crime doesn't mean you're guilty, quote unquote, forever, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think when we're talking to some people too, we always ask the question, like, did you make mistakes when you're younger? Like, did you kind of do things like this? And pretty much everyone said yes to some degree, but of course it just wasn't recorded. And that's the big thing, right? Like everyone makes mistakes, but maybe not all those mistakes are recorded and put online and shared amongst like a community. So I think that is really the difference, is that social media just played such a huge role in that. And just like smartphones, right? It's considered the first smartphone riot. And I think that's why it was so heavily documented and shared online.
So to wrap this up then, you guys have kind of touched upon this a little bit, but like, I don't want to sound like a sitcom, but what kind of takeaways do you want people who watch the documentary, what kind of takeaways you want them to have about accountability, responsibility in the age of social media? Because obviously, like, people are participating in these online mobs and they feel that is justice or that is justified or right or whatever it is. I don't know the lens they're viewing it from. So what is it that you want people to kind of take away from this documentary?
I think, well, one of the goals that we had was to make audiences think twice about when judging the rioters, the people who participate in the riot, right? Like I feel like prior to, currently I feel like the consensus, the majority of the consensus is that these people were just dumb idiots, and that's something that I would never have done. But I think the goal of the film is to really put audiences, in the night of the riot, and actually make them question, okay, actually, like, wait a second, had I been down there that night, could I have gotten swept up? And like, and it's not as black and white as people make it out to be. So I think that's like one of the first things that we would love audiences to come out, after they watch the film. I also think that we want, like, I think this film, we would love if this film could spark, a conversation about how we behave online. And I feel like what happened, in 2011 is such a great example of the dangers of social media shaming, and what can and how devastating it can be for some people, and how hard it is, for people to recover after that. Obviously, not giving a pass to people who do terrible things and who are caught, and it's posted online. But I think it, we do interview a few experts, and things, there are nuances to things that are not revealed when we just shame people online, and actually do is that the best way to go about handling some of these situations? Like I maybe yes, maybe no, maybe sometimes like it is a gray area. So I just feel like, but we need to have a bigger conversation about all these topics, especially because cancel culture is just part of our daily lives now. So I do hope that, or we hope that, this film does spark these bigger conversations that we need to be having, because we see what happened in 2011 the first time it happened, and I'm not sure what we've, if things have changed since then, and if, maybe policies need to be enacted, maybe more educational tools need to be put forward for kids who are now using social media every day. Like I didn't have social media in high school. I don't remember. I don't think I did. Maybe in grade 12. But yeah, so I think that's what my takeaway, my hope for audiences to take away from this film would be.
I think this is the problem too, is that when you go online, people have a different definition of justice. And I think that's where sometimes things break down, because they feel like whatever was that the punishment that they got for, like, the legal punishment that they got for rioting wasn't quoted enough. But it's also, I find it always weird when people, not just, I mean, if you've read like John Ronson's book, like there's all kinds of different incidences where people will call up somebody and try and get them fired, or leave an actual like voicemail. And I couldn't ever imagine getting to the point where you can feel comfortable to like leave a voicemail or like a death threat to somebody and believe that somehow that is justice for their actions. And I think sometimes that's where things break down as well, is we don't have a uniform definition of justice. Not that we have a uniform definition for most of the words we use, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many different degrees of it, right? Because I think what we've seen, especially in the past few years, is that social media is really powerful, I think, for maybe giving voice to certain communities and marginalized communities who might not get justice in their own way. And I think it's been used to really kind of highlight some of the injustices that have happened, but all to various degrees, right? And I think we just have to really kind of be mindful and aware of how we behave online, and just kind of make sure that, yeah, we're just kind of not going in and taking down a person and just releasing all our anger and frustrations, and using words that can really leave a lasting effect on a person for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it too, because I think sometimes we don't also realize the impact of what we're saying or what we're doing, right? Like I think sometimes it's the dehumanization sometimes of all this, right? Where like you just see that person completely as a writer. And I like that part in your documentary where you kind of contrast, like there was the one guy who wanted to go to medical school and he had struggles in terms of going to medical school. Another guy was dirt bike rider, right? And he lost his like sponsorships and things like that. Like, so you don't realize too, like the full impact and the consequences of your actions as the online mob.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, we really wanted to humanize people and just make sure that people understand, like, when you're seeing all the backlash of what happened online, like there's a person behind that. Like there's a person with feelings, there's a person with these experiences, like they could have been going through their own things. And yeah, like I said, most of the people were just very young people, right? They were still learning, they were still growing. They just got caught up. They made that bad decision. It was documented, and it just had a whole lasting effect on their life.
So last question, has this had a impact still on Vancouver? I've been to Vancouver since 2011. I don't feel it, but like you guys live there and you're in these communities. Does this riot, the smartphone riot, has it had an impact on Vancouver and the Vancouver communities?
Yeah, I feel like we've been put in like a timeout when the Raptors were in the championship series finals in 2019. We were the only city that wasn't allowed a Jurassic Park like viewing. Yeah, so how there's many cities who watch the game online to replicate what you guys have in Toronto. We weren't allowed that. And so obviously because I don't think we're trusted to be able to watch a sports game together downtown yet without the fear of a riot breaking out, because this has happened twice now. And and I think part of the reason is because we haven't really, like, we've never discussed what happened in 2011. I don't think on like a on like a bigger scale. And so this is, Age and I are excited to finally be able to share this story and hopefully spark conversations in Vancouver, because it really kind of got swept under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we feel like it got swept under the rug.
All right, so the documentaries, I'm Just Here for the Riot, and it's playing at Hot Docs, and it's a 30 for 30, so it should be on ESPN and TSN like soon, right? You guys have a date or not yet?
Not yet, but yes, people can expect it on ESPN in the future.
Okay. That's great. Way to go, guys. Like, and I know Kat too, like you've been making like Vancouver doc after Vancouver doc. So to finally like tell the story and like, cause this is an odd chapter in Vancouver history. So for you to contribute to that as well, it's pretty cool.
Thanks, Sammy. And thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah,
Thanks, Sammy. Thank you for having us.
Yo, that was directors Asia Youngman and Kathleen Jayme talking about their 30 for 30 documentary, I'm Just Here for the Riot. You can see I'm Just Here for the Riot at Hot Docs. You can also see it at the Vancouver International Film Festival and a number of other film festivals before it airs on TSN or ESPN, depending on when you listen to this. What online shamings or bullying have you participated in? I'm not going to quite answer that question, but I will tell you that here are some nasty online shamings that I did not participate in. In some cases, I flat out refused. I couldn't get behind. I refused to participate in them. Michael Jackson, Kanye West, Tiger Woods, Phil Spector, Justine Sacco, Monica Lewinsky, countless others. Like that's a mix of like famous people and like regular people. In this interview with Asia and Kathleen, we talked about Jon Ronson and his 2015 book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. It's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, you really need to check it out, even if you've never been publicly shamed. I'm going to paraphrase mostly a quote from page 134. All the people involved thought they were doing something good, but they only reveal that our imagination is so limited, our arsenal of potential responses is so narrow, that the only thing anyone can think of to do with an inappropriate shamer is punish her with shaming. That's it. We've got nothing. Like, there's simply no way I can get behind that concept. That's gross. That's wrong. That's not justice. No, we need stronger definitions of justice. Justice takes work. Justice takes effort. Justice is a paradigm. Like love, justice is bigger than we imagine it or allow it to be. There's nothing inspiring about shame. It's why you'll never see shame in a Spike Lee Nike ad. You know what I mean? Look, everybody knows they should go to the gym. Everybody knows they should eat better. And everybody knows overall they should make choices that accurately reflect the depth and love of self. Much like a Nike shoe, right? Just do it. However, we don't. McDonald's continues to boom, and every January we sign up for the gym only to drop off by February. Shame is synonymous with how we live because deep down we know we should live better. We should be better. There's always shoulds and couldas. Most of us already know what to do. We're just not doing it. That's why sometimes, or even a lot of the times, nobody needs the worthless 2 cents of the online commentary. In this economy, feedback from total strangers it has zero value, even if it does occasionally destroy lives. The news naturally focuses on the riot. That's the sexy stuff that drives traffic. But it doesn't matter if it's the 1992 Los Angeles riots or the 2011 Vancouver Stanley Cup riot. There is an aftermath. There's always going to be an aftermath. I'm Just Here for the Riot. It is about the riot, but it's also about the aftermath, and that is shocking. How do you balance regret with shame? How do you rebuild, forgive, and try to find something meaningful in the aftermath? I like that this is a 30 for 30 because sports, more than anything, truly unites us. Sure, some people are getting on the bandwagons as a team, be it NBA or NHL, races towards the finals, but sports brings us together. We can collectively cheer. We have more faith than Easter Mass in Rome and hope Oh man, hope is hard, but the rewards of hope are a rich dividend. I've taken up a lot of your time. Let's talk more about this. I have a Substack newsletter called My Pal Sammy. You can go to mysummerlair.com/subscribe. mysummerlair.com/subscribe. Please sign up, if only because... Well, actually, I don't really have... I don't have a good reason today. You know what? Because it's a nice thing to do. As much as all this thing we've been talking about with all this online bullying and people being mean, whatever, this is something that you can do that is really nice and will mean a lot to me. There you go. That's not bad. mysummerlair.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening to me in a Netflix world. I'm just here for the riot, yo.